Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, or whatever time zone it is wherever you in the world. It is your Lore Saviour, and today we're talking about video games and Vampire the Masquerade. Over the last, I want to say, couple of months, I've had one or two people constantly ask me which game companies would I want to make an action, an adventure, a stealth, an MMO, and an RPG Vampire the Masquerade video games. There might have been more genres, but those are the only ones that I can remember. And I've been answering this question a lot in YouTube comments. And I've been ignoring them a lot now because I've answered the question already and I'm kind of fed up of answering it over and over again. So I don't think these individuals are either seeing my responses and or they just want an answer that fits with their mind. I don't know. So rather than getting wound up and beaten up about it, I thought I'd do a video about it because I suspect there's going to be quite a fair amount of you who would be curious to see what my responses are, and I can just put this video out and answer the question once and for all, and just direct people to that in the future. And for the really short answer, I don't. And it's not so much because I don't like video games, or I don't have any faith in any game company. I mean, there's a lot of game companies I don't have a lot of faith for, but it's more or less, it's a bit more, first of all, it's a lot more nuanced than what the question may give, because when we talk action and adventures, because the questions have divided them up, like what sort of action and what sort of adventure do you want? Or even stealth, I can do a bit better than talking about those two, because there's such a broad spectrum with it all. Like if we talk about stealth, what level of stealth are we talking about? Are we talking about a game with stealth elements, like the more modern Assassin's Creed? Or are we talking about a game with a lot more stealth, like Thief? Like, I guess, one of the OG stealth games, really, that really defined the genre of stealth games. But the thing with that one is that stealth games have never been truly popular. Not in this sense that we like to believe, where we wrap things up in cuddly blankets of nostalgia. It's usually because they have other things tacked on as well. Like Metal Gear Solid, they're stealth games, but you don't play those games just for the stealth, do you? It's the story and the experience and entering the weird mind of Hideo Kojima. Like, just to point a couple of examples out there for you. And again, RPGs will look very different as well. And I have no real interest in MMOs, so I can't really answer that. Because the question implies there's only like one type of stealth or one type of action or whatever. And I could be all day like trying to fine-tune the exact experience that I want, but I'm just not really interested in Vampire the Masquerade video games. Which leads me on to my second point, I don't have a lot of faith in Paradox. As I'm sure you're all aware by now, Paradox Interactive in Stockholm, Sweden, are the game company that owns the Vampire the Masquerade license. And as I sort of begin my little, reignite the fires that is my roasting beef with Paradox Interactive, I don't want people to think, oh, here we go again, another fucking Legacy Edition stand bashing at 5th edition material. No, this isn't that. I've said many times before, I like 5th edition, I start with 5th edition, yada yada yada. It's just the general direction of things now that I don't approve of. And I don't have to like every single thing that they put out, because that's just fucking weird. And if I start doing that and offer no criticism and just blindly give praise to any and everything just because it does something I remotely like, that's cult-like behaviours, and then we end up situations like the US of A. Slight exaggeration, but just think about that for a moment as I waffle away. Paradox Interactive don't really seem to care much about the license that is the World of Darkness. And I think that reflects greatly upon the diversity of the video games. And what I mean is that the ones that people tend to like the most are the vampire ones, obviously, because you've got some of the more recent Werewolf and Wraith the Oblivion video games, and all the ones that people like are the story-driven ones, the visual novels and the narrative text ones that have no pictures and very minimal art, which I haven't played. I mean, I play-tested one of them many years ago, but I just couldn't really cope with it because it's literally just text on a white document, and I just think that's a bit fucking cheeky. Like, at least give some fucking artwork, or at least a bit more than just to highlight chapter starts, or a bit of music or something that makes it feel more like a visual novel, like Coteries and Shadows of New York, which I think are the finest VtM games that we have had since Bloodlines. And some people may not like that because visual novels are just interactive books, But those games withdraw distance, really demonstrate that they understand and appreciate Vampire the Masquerade. And the folks at Different Tales who did Heart of the Forest and the new one, Purgatory, really show that they understand the setting of Werewolf. Even with Purgatory, that you have the newer 5th edition ideas, they understand that setting well, and with their own influences of the older editions of Werewolf as well. They get it, through the artwork, for the music, for the narratives, they get it. And then you have fucking Blood Hunt, which is a fucking battle royale, where you do fucking 360 no scopes and taking headshots and diabolizing people in fucking public. That's fine, but playing Sabat and the TTRPGs for 5th edition, I've made that point before, but it just needs to be fucking said. Swan Song seems to offer a narrative experience that a fair amount of people were into, but they look like shit. And Blood Hunt doesn't particularly look fantastic either. Earth Blood doesn't look fucking great either. I mean, trailers look fucking fantastic for those games. But for the product that was actually offered, fucking Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 graphics. And I don't often complain about graphics of things because as long as the story and the gameplay is stellar, then it doesn't matter too much. But when you put out these trailers with the then current generation graphics, and then you put out something like that, it just makes you feel you've been cheated somewhat. And if we talk about games where the themes and the presentation is sort of a bit of a weird disconnect with the TTRPG experience, remember Justice. I'd be surprised if you know that, because I've never seen a single soul talk about this. Vampire the Masquerade Justice is a VR stealth game where you play a member of the Assamites, or Banu Hakim, infiltrating Venice ruled by the Hakata, where you have those vampire clans firing spectral skull ghosty things at you for attacks. Yeah, because that's something that you can do in the TTRPG game. I mean, granted, there's a very obscure necromancy ritual that can animate skulls and they can fire in a straight line at you. It's in a V20 Dark Ages book. I have my doubts that that's what they were going for. That it does feel very video gamey. Now, I've never played it, admittedly. I watched somebody play it because I was curious to see what it was like. Because I don't own a VR set, which is a problem in of itself, that you make something really niche for a niche audience and make it even nicher. Like, you know, it's just a bit weird for me personally. The same with Wraith the Oblivion. But that is like 10 times worse because not 5 people fucking bother engaging with Wraith the Oblivion. And I heard very mixed things about that game as a whole. So, I mean, if I had a VR set, I would love to fucking play that because that seems like right up my street for something to play. But alas, I don't really have the tools required to do that. But yeah, Justice, that was announced on the same fucking day that it was announced that the Chinese room are taking over control with Bloodlines 2. So of course that was going to get overshadowed somewhat. And then we got the whole fucking Bloodlines 2 shenanigans, to be honest. Now, with more trailers and dev diaries that they are putting out on a near weekly basis, it does look like it's improving, graphically at least. Then you have the gameplay itself, which is very much focused on delivering a more action-orientated experience with elements of an RPG in there, which still annoys people, because even if your only experience with Vampire the Masquerade is through Bloodlines, and you hear that there's a sequel coming out, you would naturally expect that the sequel would follow up in being like this immersive role-playing experience where there are different ways of approaching your scenarios. Now, granted, Bloodlines 2 does seem to offer that general direction of things, but it does seem to be more focused towards the action side of things. Also, it's an action game where you can't use guns or weapons, which I think is a bit weird, providing you do have the correct thaumaturgy powers to control guns in mid-air, because that's definitely not a fucking Masquerade violation. But hey, what do I fucking know? I'm just a salty fan. But even with Bloodlines 2, there is that really big fucking elephant in the room that a lot of people aren't really addressing anymore. And it's the fact that you're playing as an elder vampire. And I have lots of opinions about that. So let's just start with the obvious one. When Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition came out, there was obviously edition warring going on between the 5th and the 20th anniversary edition hardcore fans. And from what I saw, there was a lot of 5th edition fans, including some of the people who would later go and work at the company, who would complain that all they saw in Vampire was this intense power gaming fantasy, that all that people wanted to do was play as elder vampires and change the world with their Methuselah and elder powers, which, yeah, sure, if you take a screenshot of something out of context with no further context provided to it, then yeah, it does kind of look like that's all that people were doing, but that was never been the case. You know, there's somebody who has read an extensive amount of the material and is engaged with different fans of all sorts of different ages and experiences. That's very rarely the fucking experience. Like, there's a group on my Discord server who are playing a chronicle where they are going through the ages, so they're becoming elders and able to do more cool things. But that's a very specific example. Like, it's not every single fucking vampire experience. And this had been carrying on for years, where now you've got this big fucking rift, greater than the fucking gauntlet, the shroud, whatever, within the world of darkness. Where now, a lot of these fans don't really seem to interact with each other, and it's just a bit sad. Then you have Blood Hunt that, as I've already mentioned, undermines a lot of these ideas. You have the Sabbat book that also undermined a lot of these ideas. Now you have Bloodlines too, where you play as an elder who has a lot of power from the get-go. One of the things that made Bloodlines really fucking special was that, yes, technically your character was a elder because of, you know, how that game fucking ends with you and LaCroix, but you don't feel it. You don't feel like somebody who has a lot of power and experience. You are thrust into a world, and you are, for all intents and purposes, a fucking neonate with no power, no influence, and having to learn things as you go along. And every single fucking time you step out of a door, you're doing your fucking best to survival. Even if you know Bloodlines at the back of your hand, it still creates this wonderful atmosphere, like you are this lone fucking soldier with nobody to look out for you. I don't want to say it's terrifying, because I'm very much aware of Bloodlines now, but it's a wonderful nursing experience. And that all the TTRPGs focus on you playing this younger, more inexperienced vampire. And I've run games with people where players expected this much larger power fantasy, but then realised that, fuck, that's not how you play the game at all. For every little power you get, someone's going to take half of that away. That's the joy of Vampire the Masquerade, and really that's something that makes it a lot more beautiful and better than a lot of vampire media, is that it focuses on the younger vampire that has that little power and experience. It's enough for you to indulge in your power fantasies of being bigger, better, stronger than everything else around you, but not enough where you feels like you're playing the game on fucking cheat mode. And I feel that whether it's Paradox or the Chinese Room, probably Paradox to be fair, that place the focus on you being an elder, having all that power, not only does away with what makes fucking Vampire the Masquerade, but it shows a grossly huge misunderstanding about what vampire is. And sure, your character, who is a sheriff, is sort of at ground zero because they've been at fucking Torpor for ages, but none of that has been reflected in the dev diaries, none of that has been reflected in the trailers and whatnot. It's all about being this powerful vampire who's a sheriff who has this status of being powerful and influential figure, and I just think that's just really fucking weird. Now, of course, that is not to say that there isn't a game market with that, but I think doing that as your fucking AAA Vampire the Masquerade game that's meant to draw in as much money as possible, who will also play your fucking TTRPG that you clearly don't fucking care about anymore, is just a bit fucking weird. It just shows that Paradox see it as Vampire as this huge power fantasy where vampires are demigods within the world of darkness. And if you have a look about how powerful the very basic V5 powers are for the vampire, and compare it to what the fucking werewolves can do, and what the fucking hunters can do for 5th edition, they completely outstrip the competition, and that's just really fucking sad. And of course, these hardcore 5th edition fans won't ever admit this now, but they're hypocrites, and I just find the whole thing really frustrating. So for the really short answer, I don't trust Paradox to allow a game company to deliver a true Vampire the Masquerade experience, because they're just going to be controlling things and dictating that you are super powerful. Although, that being said, Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife, from the footage that I saw, does kind of make you feel like a Wraith, but I think it goes about presenting its story and the elements of Wraith in a rather gamey, cack-handed way. Like, I think the game is supposed to be a harrowing rather than a true reflection on what Wraith the Oblivion 5th edition could be, but Paradox changed their fucking mind with every new fucking book about what their games are going to be, so who knows what 5th edition Wraith would be. But Lore, I hear some of you ask, like, regardless of genre, is there a type of Vampire the Masquerade video game you would want? Well, first of all, it's so nice of you to actually ask what I want out of life. That only ever happens to my partner these days, and they're an exceptional case of individuals, and I mean that in all senses of the words. But considering what I've just been rambling on for the last nearly 20 minutes now, no, not really, because it all comes down to fucking Paradox sinking their fucking gribby mitts and stifling creativity, which I just think is a bit disappointing. Like, yeah, I get it, it's their property, it's their license, and they have to give some direction about what's going on, and I also understand that a franchise needs to develop and do new things, and I also think and appreciate and understand that presenting the story in new and exciting ways is a much needed thing, especially the fact that I got into fucking Vampire via the video game, Bloodlines, and I suspect that's going to be the case with a lot of you as well. I, this salty fan, just think that how it's been handled so far, it's just a wee bit shit overall, which is quite a shame. Or at least shit in the last 4-ish years. So yeah, that's sad, but that's what I ultimately think about the matter. Now, regarding the sort of video game that I would like, now this might sound a little controversial to some of you, but I would actually like a video game that felt like the tabletop role-playing game. Put that in your fucking pipe and smoke it. Like, Coteries and Shadows of New York work so well because they do feel like the fucking video game. Sorry, the tabletop game. Like, you're new neonate and you learn the world as you play, and disciplines, the powers, the society, the structure, just bit by bit. It's not just all going to be fucking info dumps on one of you, and your character's expected to know everything. Even with Shadows of New York, where you end up, if you do the good ending, a very influential and powerful figure, because draw distance, acknowledge and understand the role of the La Sombra within the Camarilla. They've read their material, they've done their homework, they understand the La Sombra clan outside of 5th edition, because there's a lot of fucking nuance there. And then with the newer one, Reckoning of New York, which I haven't played, Julia is there as an influential member of the Primogens. So you can do power fantasies right, fucking Chinese Room and Paradox. You do it from the perspective of the fucking neonate, not a fucking elder who's been in torpor for 100 years. It is already a few terms too many for new players to understand. But I digress. I actually covered this topic about a year ago now, notably when the weather was nicer, which is going to appear in a card right now. But I want something that would be akin to Redemption and or Baldur's Gate 3. I say that because we have come a long way with games in that 30-year span, and I think in the right hands and under the right direction, we could get a really engaging Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game experience where it's like a top-down, you know, moving a little coterie around with different powers and whatnot. I think that could be really cool, because then it would, with something like Baldur's Gate 3, it would become a lot more about the narrative rather than just combat. Now, I have to admit that doing something like that with Vampire would be very weird, because D&D has always been a fucking war game with Tolkien dressing on. And Vampire the Masquerade is not really combat heavy, so trying to do something that was more on a social level might be a bit difficult to do, or rather it would require an extra bit of thinking. There was that fan game that was in like the fucking Creator Vampire Jam thing that was akin to Disco Elysium, but that's... I'm not counting that at the moment because we haven't heard anything about any of the fucking winners. That was supposed to like have funding or whatever from Paradox. I don't really remember, I don't really care, to be honest. But I'm talking about like a large scale thing that people can attach and associate with. I think something like Baldur's Gate 3 or Redemption even for Vampire the Masquerade would be a really cool experience. Now, it also has the added issue, like, how would you present cities like that? Because at least with D&D you can do like fuck off huge landscapes. With a city sort of thing, that requires a lot of research and whatnot, and programming and etc. and so forth, which obviously Baldur's Gate 3 with all of its fucking fantastical pieces, that had a lot of work put into it as well. But, you know, it's just the mindset is different. I'm not quite too sure how well that would translate to that format. Now obviously I'm not into game development, I'm not a game dev, so I don't really know how fucking difficult or easy any of these things are. I just presume that something on that scale, or something a little close to that, would take many years of work and the creative freedom to do what they please, because I believe Larian Studios had a bit of leeway of presenting well, Baldur's Gate and the rest of it without too much interference from Wizards of the Coast. I'm not saying that with any degree of confidence, but it's just something that I vaguely remember that's sort of tingling in the back of my brain or whatever. And a Vampire the Masquerade experience like that would be pretty cool. Like, you do social interactions or use powers and seeing the fucking dice roll. That would be just small little details like that. That'd just be really cool. But then again, the D10 does not have the gravitas that is the D20, you know? So it'd be interesting to see how that would pan out. But that would be cool. Like, even if it's just 5th edition, like I'm saying, if it's a bad thing, just seeing that represented would be really fucking cool. And I say that with like the hunger mechanics and whatnot, that could produce some really interesting effects as well. Like getting messy criticals or bestial failures. That'd actually require a lot of work, like you frenzying at the wrong opportune moment. That would be really fucking cool. I'm exciting myself up for something that will probably never happen. But there's a lot you could do with that, rather than just fucking hack and slash levitating gun sort of things and hand-fisting blood resonance back into Bloodlines. And I say that because blood resonance was a thing in Bloodlines 2 originally when it was being developed by Hardsuit Labs that they put into V5. And if you wondered why that game mechanic in the TTRPG felt very gamey, now you know why. Because that was exactly the intention, to legitimize it being a thing in the tabletop universe. And that pretty much sums up the sort of VtM video game that I want. Basically fuck all until I saw that there were significant improvements in the standards that I believe Vampire the Masquerade could hit. How about you lot? What sort of Vampire the Masquerade video game would you want? Let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with what I said, or do you disagree? Let it all out. Just don't hold anything back. Just don't be a dick, you know. There's a fine line and all. Now whilst you're down there, you can purchase a variety of Vampire the Masquerade books to include into your TTRPG games. If you purchase them with those specific links, or use the special affiliate code and paste it in the URL of any book from Drive-Thru-RPG that you want before you add it to the cart, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate on Drive-Thru-RPG, and that little coinage will help go a very long way. But if you can't do that because times are hard and all of that, I totally understand and respect that. But what you can definitely do is like, share, and subscribe to this video and share it with all that love what I do, and I'll see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. Until next time, farewell.